Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining today's alumni webinar. My name is Emma Maynard, and I'm the Assistant Director of Career and Network Programming here in the Office of Alumni Relations at JMU. I'm also a proud double Duke. I graduated in 2007 with my bachelor's in sociology, and then in 2016 with my master's in adult education. Today's webinar is brought to you by the JMU Alumni Association, and we're thrilled to bring you this webinar program with the goal of providing career and network-related resources that will help you conveniently cultivate your professional self while also exploring the power of the Madison Network. So thank you all for joining us either live or viewing the recording later on. Before I introduce today's speaker, I just want to cover a few brief housekeeping notes. So if you are participating live, please note that your microphones have been muted for the presentation. However, you do have a chat feature, so make sure that you bring down your chat box. It's located, the icon, in the top right-hand corner of your screen so that you can have that down and use the chat feature to ask questions or interact with your fellow Dukes. If you have questions during the presentation, please select to send your questions privately to me, the host, and I'll make sure to share those at the end with Peg. If you would like to interact with the fellow Dukes that are online today, you can simply use the chat feature, select all attendees, type in your responses, your thoughts or messages, and select send. We'd also love to see you live tweet today during this webinar. You can use hashtag JMUAAwebinar as well as hashtag JMU. And those are also typed right now into the chat feature for you to remember to use those hashtags. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and accessible on our website in the Career and Networking section of our page. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's alumni webinar speaker, Peg Helminski. Peg has been helping people problem solve and grow into their potential for more than 30 years. She has a master's degree in counseling from JMU. And prior to opening her coaching practice, Peg has been a mental health and a career counselor, an author and speaker, a writing mentor and public speaking coach, an executive assistant, and a university staff member. She has led a statewide chapter of a professional writing organization, was a member of the founding board for a charity to help Chinese children orphaned by HIV and AIDS, and has been a grant consultant helping nonprofit organizations get started and grow. Peg was the winner of the Minneapolis area Interdenominational Walk the Talk Award for a sermon combating domestic violence, and the recipient of a Duke University Outstanding Staff Award for the support of the LGBT students and staff of Duke University. She has won numerous awards for writing and public speaking. Peg is currently president and mentor to the Durham Rescue Mission Toastmasters Club. Originally from Wall, New Jersey, she has relocated and reinvented herself 7 times in her adult life and currently lives in Cary, North Carolina. It's now with my excitement and pure thrill to hear more about this topic of reinventing yourself to turn things over to Peg. Just one second, everybody. Looks like we need Peg to get back on with us, so just hang on tight for me.
Emma?
Peg, are you on?
I am. I was hearing you. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are all hearing you all now.
Okay, great.
And just as a I've had to unmute most of our attendees here to ensure that we can hear Peg, so please note that you may be unmuted right now if you are an attendee. So just mind your typing if you can. Thanks, everybody. Peg, it's all you.
Okay. Thank you, Emma, for that great introduction. I am really excited to be doing this. I haven't been back to JMU in many years, and it's really exciting to just do this. I want to say that I usually do live audience kinds of workshops, and this kind of webinar thing is a little disorienting to me because I usually expect it to be kind of a shared experience where I read signals from my audience and they participate actively in discussion with me. So first of all, I want to encourage you to use the chat feature and ask questions at the end. I'm sorry that we really can't do that throughout the presentation. And before we get started, I'd like you to, you can use your cell phone or your computer, and you can go to www.menti.com and use the code 889454 and just answer the question there about what is your main expectation for today's webinar. That's www.menti.com 889454. There it goes. Great, we're getting a variety of responses here. This really helps me to know where I need to focus. These numbers look a little off to me, though. I don't see how we can have 55% and 55%. Okay, great. It looks like some of you are really looking for some clear direction here, and I will try to do that. If I don't meet your expectations, so feel free to follow up. There's all kinds of contact information on my last slide. So, how have careers changed? At the dawn of time, all humans were hunters and gatherers. And about 10,000 years ago, agrarian society began, and this allowed society to stabilize in one given location. Up until then, almost everybody was a hunter, a gatherer, or a farmer. But 1790 saw the dawn of the industrial era. Maybe our grandparents, depending on how old we are, or great-grandparents, life was pretty hard, and most work was really kind of manual. About 100 years ago or so, automation began in 1913 with the assembly line, and people still thought of finding a good employer and signing up for life. They defined themselves as their job description, such as I'm a butcher, I'm a baker, I'm a candlestick maker, I'm a forger, whatever. About 50 years ago, we began to see another shift. And as you'll notice, the shifts are happening more and more rapidly. And this time, people tended to stick around for only 4 to 5 years before they moved to their next job. And increasingly, these jobs were in offices, and those offices increasingly were defined as cubicles. Currently, we're seeing an even bigger shift. This has been brought on by the computer revolution, and technology skills are dominating the workforce. And beginning with the millennial generation, or Generation Y, those born in 1980 through 1995, and Generation Z, those are coming of age now, born in 1996 through 2009. For many, the office or the concept of an office is passé. They are their mobile office. And this has an impact not only in what defines work, but where work is defined. A person sitting with a laptop in an airport or on a white sand beach is more reality now than fantasy. But there's a downside to this. For one thing, we have less definition about work and leisure. Our boss can call us at any time to ask about a certain project. But for me, and for many people like me, that flexibility was a fair trade. I worked as a freelance writer, and in addition to 2 novels and a children's tour guide for the Twin Cities, I wrote for magazines, designed flyers and promotional materials for businesses, and wrote hundreds of articles for educational testing. We had adopted a little boy who had numerous special needs, and it seemed like I had at least 1 doctor's appointment a day for him for the first 2 years after adoption. So I spent a lot of time in doctors' waiting rooms with a laptop on my knees writing. I also spent a lot of nights writing into the wee hours so that I could meet deadlines. But to me, it was worth it to be able to work and also be a mom and coordinate all of his medical care. So why do people change careers? One big reason is that we become what we know, seldom dreaming beyond our vocabulary. When our worldview expands, our expectations also expand. Beyond our gender definitions and the expectations of gender roles imposed by society, we also have family expectations that shape who we want to become and what we think of the world. I was a guidance counselor in the Shenandoah Valley right after I graduated from school, and I found one student was also often placing her test papers under the class fish tank. These were good papers, often 100%, and she didn't want to bring them home to her parents because they shamed her for being uppity and vain about her accomplishments. Her whole family worked for the Marvell poultry factory, plucking chickens and splitting breastbones. As far as they were concerned, this was their daughter's destiny. I helped her parents realize that her abilities could take her far beyond anything their experience could guide her toward. And that could be good for the entire family. Beyond what our family can expose us to, society at large plays a role in shaping what we dream. If all radio announcers are male, as they once were, it is hard for a young girl to think that this is something she could be. And if all elected officials on a ballot are white, it is hard for a child of color to dream of being a senator. We tend to view ourselves in categories of like me and not like me, or as social scientists term it, the in-groups and the out-groups. We don't usually aspire to the things that are of the out-group because by definition they are not like us. We usually only aspire to the things of the in-group. Our understanding of in and out groups can shift over time, depending on how we define us. So if we take gender out of the requirement for a career field, we can then define ourselves as a member of that group. These definitions in the past 2 generations have been expanding rapidly. Rosie the Riveter from World War II taught us that women can do welding and need not be relegated to homemaking. What you want to be when you grow up changes as you grow up. When I was younger, I dreamed of being an archaeologist. I had romantic ideas about traipsing around the African bush seeking for the evolutionary missing link. I also knew that I wanted to be a mother, and as I grew older, I saw a conflict. The thought of giving birth in the bush hundreds of miles from a sanitary hospital scared me silly. So when I went into grad school, I changed my focus to counseling, deciding to work with living people rather than studying long-gone peoples. Sometimes we prepare for a career only to find it closed to us or the field changed. Shortly after I graduated from JMU, states began licensing counselors. But they all had different requirements, and following my husband's career from state to state, I soon found myself in a state where I could not be licensed and could not practice as a counselor. I had to reinvent myself. sometimes life defines our career choices, just as our career choices sometimes define our life. You can't live in a rural area with a low population density and expect to be a Wall Street stockbroker. And yet, I have known people who commute 2 hours each way to work to meet both objectives. To them, this is a reasonable compromise. In my case, adopting a special needs child redefined my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. Any child, though, can shift your priorities. When my first son was born and my husband was still in his doctoral program, I knew I wanted to be home with my baby as much as possible, but also needed to work. I found a job as a university research assistant that I could work mostly from home. I went in 1 day a week to attend a staff meeting and collect my case files for the week. Then I made telephone calls to subjects as time allowed and wrote up reports, usually late at night, sometimes while nursing a baby. The job is not what we imagined. My daughter-in-law has a master's degree in criminal investigation. When she finished grad school, she took a job with the police department as a police investigator. She soon found out that the job entailed more answering telephones and doing basic clerical work than any actual investigation. So she found another job with an insurance company where she does fraud investigation. Much happier, but the first job was not at all what she envisioned. The job itself actually changes. My husband, with many years' experience in child forensic psychology, accepted a job once as an inpatient adolescent psychologist. 6 weeks into the job, they moved him to an adult chronic unit because they had a greater need in that department. It was not the job he agreed to, but the state and the employer in this area can hire and fire at will. His choice was to either go as reassigned or quit. Once you have a family, the second option is harder to take. So he took the reassignment and worked. It took him almost 2 years to renegotiate himself back to a position where he felt he was better qualified. The job we once did no longer exists. There's a lot of this. My mother, for example, was a telephone switchboard operator. That job completely disappeared by the mid-70s. Early in my career, I worked for the Virginia Employment Commission as a career counselor. Most of the people I counseled were displaced workers, people like my mom whose jobs had been taken over by automation. Or a new, more exciting career field opens up. For example, a lawyer transitioning into politics or to being a judge. One of my cousins, who was much older than I am, actually is closer in age to my father, learned to program computers when that was a very new, risky proposition. Some people thought it was a fad that would soon blow over. So why are you considering a career change? I want you to go back to the Menti and put in the code 889454 again. great. We are getting a variety of answers here. This is great. Okay. Whether you choose to make a career change or you're forced into it by the winds of time or a spouse's transfer, the first rule is don't panic. It's seldom as bad as it appears, truly. Take a deep breath and be deliberate in your actions. Don't just jump at the first opportunity, no matter how pressed you feel. Having said that, if you are displaced for one reason or another, you may need to find a stopgap position while you sort out your options, and just to keep yourself and your bills paid. If that's what you need, by all means do it. It is much harder to focus on making a clear plan for action if you are stressed about being evicted or not being able to pay your bills. So, before you start, determine if you need or want to change completely or simply redirect. For example, do you want to get out of teaching or just out of teaching in a school environment? Have you had enough of marketing or just enough of working for a particular company? Do some analysis about why you want to change and what is motivating that desire for change. Too often people jump from one bad career match to another because they fail to take the steps to act deliberately. So take the time to assess what skills do you have. Make a complete list of all of your skills, especially skills you have never used in your present job. Julie knew that she had an intuitive sense about color and really loved seeing how different colors could make a certain look or feel come alive. After 6 years of working as an administrative assistant in an accounting office, which she said was making her brain dead, she became a color and design consultant at a Sherwin-Williams store. Initially, she started just on weekends and eventually jumped to full-time. At first, it was a bit of a pay cut, but she soon talked her boss into letting her do workshops on how to rag over and stencil borders and other techniques of painting and interior design. She took some courses in design at night and eventually branched off and started her own design consulting business. What passions drive you? Phil was a counselor working with developmentally delayed population. He didn't hate his job, but really had a desire to help people in crisis. He went back to school for a nursing degree and now works in a busy emergency room in Southern California. What do you value in life? Mark valued peace and quiet. He didn't need much stuff in life. He became a professional house sitter, often acting as a caretaker for mansions and castles around the world. He got to tour the world as his job. It was a great job for a single guy. What do you want to do? A friend of mine had 2 sons who decided to take their love of the brew to a new level. So they took courses in microbrewing and spent 2 years experimenting in the garage while keeping their day jobs. Finally, they had perfected a consistent flavor, developed a label, rented a store, filed all the paperwork, and last summer opened their own microbrewery and restaurant. Sometimes we have to have an inner drive to do or be something, but we think we can't do it because family pressures won't allow for such a thing. Ask yourself, why do you want to do that? You will never succeed if your motivation is to finally make your father proud of you by becoming an engineer. A young man I knew hated every class he took in college. He was very bright and, in fact, good at engineering, but he absolutely hated it. His personality type really demanded that he find some kind of meaning in his work, and he found no meaning in engineering. He graduated and couldn't find a job. I suspect because he projected that he really didn't like engineering. He worked a series of dead-end jobs in food service until he finally landed a job as a client advocate in a nonprofit organization serving developmentally disabled folks. He is now thriving and considering going back for a master's in nonprofit management. Ask yourself, too, is this a realistic goal? A writing teacher I once had often said, everyone wants to be an author, but no one wants to sit in a chair for 10 to 12 hours a day and write. Likewise, you may dream of being a movie star, a musician, or a professional athlete, but do you have the innate skills, and are you willing to put in the long, lonely hours to achieve that goal that mastery demands in these fields? What resources do you already have? By this I mean, what experience or training do you already have that can translate into the new field, as well as who do you know who could give you inside information? Will you need more training or education? Does the field you want to enter require specialized training, a certificate, a license? Do you need to pass some kind of a test? Is there a way to start in the field and get licensed along the way? For example, some states have such a shortage of teachers that they have a degree. If you have a degree in a desirable field such as technology, you can often start teaching as long as you complete a master's degree in education and pass teacher certification within a certain time frame. Some businesses have education and training programs. You may be able to keep your present job while training for your next job. A young woman I know named Babby knew she couldn't afford to go to college, so she took a job as an administrative assistant in a medical center of a large university. After 2 years, she qualified for a tuition assistance benefit and had nursing manager written into her career plan. She started nursing school in the same university, and her boss let her schedule her workday around classes. She recently graduated and is now looking for a nursing job. Once she gets a few years of experience, she intends to apply for more education in management. Who can you talk to interview for information? This is the best piece of advice I was ever given. Talk to people, and not just one person. Talk to everyone you can find in a field that you are interested in. We may have all sorts of ideas about what a job is like, but our perception may be skewed by TV or rumor and have little basis in reality. People who are actually living the job can tell you all the pros and cons. Once you decide on a new direction, your first step is to learn the new vocabulary. Every field has its specialized vocabulary. For example, a friend who wanted to start her own business organizing other people's closets. She was an administrative assistant, and instead of saying she could file, said she could organize and prioritize items in a hierarchical manner. You need to translate your assets into a new field. It's up to you to learn the vocabulary and translate your skills into this new vocabulary. It amazes me that recruiters don't seem to intuitively translate skills across fields. For example, I had been the director of a job training program. I hired, trained, and supervised both the counseling staff and the worksite supervisors. When I moved to an academic environment, I learned I had to say that I recruited staff, not hired staff. I designed curriculum for professional staff development, not trained staff, as well as providing counseling, case oversight, and supervision of the worksite skills development staff and the development of their instructional curriculum. The key words here were curriculum, oversight, designed. It's just that in a different environment, different keywords stand out. You need to learn what those words are and start using them. Customize your resume in the language of your new career. And for this, honestly, I mean, if you are responding to a job posting, change the wording of your resume to reflect the job posting. Today, too many applicants go through a computer screening as the first stage of recruitment. To get through, the search tool will need to find the exact words it's looking for in your resume. Highlight relevant skills and let go of irrelevant information. If you had a job that had a large variety of responsibilities, highlight only those responsibilities that are pertinent to the job you want to get. This is really hard, I know, because it often means leaving out significant accomplishments, but leave out anything that could steer a recruiter's thoughts in a different direction. Get additional training if needed. Seriously, if you have a dream of being a vocalist and you have the pipes to take you there, make sure you get some voice lessons. Singing in the shower and singing on stage are remotely different experiences. Even singing for a familiar group like a church or a school is very different than singing for the public at large. Shadow someone doing what you want to do. I know a young lady who takes beautiful photos and thought she might like to be a photographer, so she shadowed a photographer for a couple of weeks. She didn't realize that a professional photographer has to lug around a lot of equipment. She also found out that Bridezilla does exist and that the mother of Bridezilla can be even more difficult to deal with. Thinking it was perhaps the type of photographer, she then followed a nature photographer who lugged equipment through swampy muck just before dawn to get just the right lighting for some bird photos. It involved a lot of mosquitoes. Who wants this, she decided. So glad she decided that before investing in a career change. Volunteer. Lynn had a high-pressure job and decided she wanted to be a bread baker. She admitted she had all sorts of romantic ideas about what work would be like, so she made some friends with a local craft bakery and volunteered to help out a few weekends. Before deciding she actually did love it, she jumped ship and opened her own bakery in a cozy little town in Vermont. Hang out with the people with whom you want to work. Now, this is not actually a career change story, but from the time he was a little kid, Mike wanted to be a firefighter. Most kids outgrow this, but Mike didn't. He started hanging out at the firehouse after school and on his day off after his after-school job at the grocery store. He helped to polish the truck, swept the floor, inspected hoses, listening to stories of the firefighters, all the while learning. He started living the job even before he was old enough to take the test, which he passed on the first try. Once you've decided what you want to do and you're clear about what you want, you need to power network. This means telling everyone what you plan to do. Go through your contacts list. See who you already know in the field. Ask them who they know that you can interview for information. Again, talk to as many people as you can. What do they like about their job? What do they hate? How would they recommend you get a foot in the door? Ask them to be honest. What skills or training do you need to add before you'd be considered a good candidate? Always, always ask, who else do you recommend I talk with? Join a professional organization. Better yet, volunteer for that group. Be part of the conference committee or a club officer. Take on every educational or networking opportunity you can. Learn to use social media as a career networking tool. LinkedIn can be particularly powerful. My niece wanted to get into set design for a major motion picture studio, a highly competitive field. She had done years of theater in high school and even graduated from a top university with a degree in theater design. She looked at my LinkedIn account and noticed that I had a close friend who works for Universal Studios. This friend agreed to meet with my niece and passed her along to another person and then another, and in about 6 months, my niece landed her dream job, and it's everything she dreamed it would be. Do something every day to expand your horizon and advance toward your goal. Anything worthwhile takes time. Invest yourself in the process and in your future. But remember to take a break from time to time because change is really, really hard work. As the world shrinks, opportunity grows. What is really important is that you achieve the balance you need to thrive. This slide just has some random facts to help you in your transition. Think outside the box, maybe outside the country. Today, our world truly is growing smaller. I have 2 younger cousins who have jobs in Europe. One of them is fluent in 4 languages and works as a translator for the EU. Another of my cousins, now retired, worked for IBM in Japan for over 30 years. My former next-door neighbor now lives in Japan. Only 4% of job seekers find a job through the want ads or job postings. Just let that sink in. If your only way of going about looking for a job is looking through want ads and job postings, your chances of finding a job are greatly diminished. A recent article on livecareer.com quotes a U.S. Department of Labor article statistics that 24% of job seekers find their job through personal connections and 48% through referrals from personal connections. An additional 23% find their jobs through an agency. The biggest success comes from personal connections and referrals from personal connections. Networking is key. 51% of workers are actively seeking a new job. Not to be discouraging, but this does not take into account all of the new graduates who are out there entering the job market. There is a lot of competition out there, a lot of mobility in the career force, which is why you need to shine. You need to be deliberate and focused in your approach to career change. Younger job seekers are more likely to project confidence. And confidence, grit, and determination will open more opportunities than anything else. Let me repeat that. Confidence, grit, and determination will open more opportunities than anything else. If 2 people have the same qualifications and one comes across as more confident and persistent, that person will win the job. Older workers often complain, "I had so much more experience than that person they hired." But these same older workers often lack the confidence, self-assurance, and enthusiasm of the younger workers. If you really want something, don't be restrained about letting the hiring manager know. Now, doing a job search is discouraging, and it's a lot of hard work. You may have heard, that finding a job is a job, and you need to treat it that way if you're going to be successful. You may need to give yourself a pep talk before each contact, especially if you've been looking for a while, and especially if you are by nature an introvert who doesn't take reaching out to other people as second nature. Take the time to review your qualifications and focus on exactly what you want to do. Be clear in your mind about what you have to offer, what makes you shine as a candidate, and what you are willing to compromise. 64% of adults who change jobs do so every 1 to 5 years. The old model of finding a good company to settle down with and staying there for the duration of a career is gone. In fact, in some fields, it is nearly impossible to advance without changing companies or accepting a transfer to another state or another country. And this is just to keep in mind as you prepare what you need to present yourself. More recruiters react negatively to profanity, 65%, and grammar and punctuation errors, 61%, in Facebook posts than do references to alcohol use, 47%. So presentation matters, and this includes social media. Today, recruiters will ask for your social media presence and ask for passcodes so that they get in and see, you know, how you're posting and how you're presenting yourself. So that's pretty much what I have. I have one more slide at the end, which for your feedback, and I could take questions now.
Thanks so much, Peg, for sharing some of that information. I like how you went from, you know, kind of identifying that, hey, it's time to kind of consider some other options to what that even looks like and how to make that a reality. We have had some questions come in that we're hoping that you can answer. And any of our listeners, as you have questions, please send those to me via the chat to the host, and we'll share those with Peg for her feedback. Anything that isn't answered in the time, Peg has her final slide up there and is open to you all reaching out. If there's things that you want to talk more one-on-one with her, she is available for that, so her contact information is there. So the first question we had, Peg, was what are some ways to tolerate ambiguity while living in a transitional period, you know, between figuring out what changes you really want to make in your career and in life? How do you deal with that question mark period if you're not quite sure the direction you want to start heading in?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. But, you know, somebody once said to me, you know, just embrace the question. You can't always know all the answers all the time, and sometimes you feel like you're walking in 2 different or 3 different directions at a time trying to sort things out. And I think the biggest thing we can do for ourselves in those times is to just give ourselves the space to say, hey, I'm in process. I don't have the answer yet. Because I think a lot in our society, we want the answers right now. And some answers, they really deserve to take the time to invest and decide what you want to do. You know, like the young lady that I talked about who wanted to be a photographer and took the time to spend several weeks, you know, shadowing a photographer in a couple of different types of photography to realize that, no, there was a lot about that. She loved making beautiful pictures, but she did not like lugging around heavy equipment. She did not like going through a swamp at dawn. You know, so it's part of the process. You have to give yourself time to do that. And I think part of the stress of the ambiguity period is that we tell ourselves we should have this together by now.
On that, what recommendations do you have for, besides, you know, just the acceptance piece, but if you are dealing with that anxiety or stress caused by that question mark, do you have recommendations on how to more positively channel the negative feelings?
You know, honestly, I think if you can find some kind of a support group, if there's, like I used to run a support group through the Employment Commission. I don't know if they do that now or not. Some coaches do support groups if they have enough people, you know, that are going through that at the same time. It really helps to have other people that are going through the same thing do it with you. Absolutely. So that you don't feel so alone and you can step back and stop pressuring yourself. So if you can find any kind of a group like that. I think also if you think there's a certain direction that you really are looking toward going to find a professional organization in that field and join it and become an active member. It helps you to sort of begin to identify yourself in that field. And it also begins to build your network in that field.
Right. I completely agree with that, and hopefully that feedback helps the individual who asked that question. Another question that came in is in reference to the power network that you were talking about. And I really liked the whole idea of, don't just tell one person, create that wave to really showcase what it is that you want to do. This alum mentions that they struggle with the idea of power networking, that it can be really tricky when so many of the people you know are also those that you work with, and you may not want to let them be aware of your desire to leave a current situation. Do you have thoughts or recommendations on how to navigate that?
Yeah, that is tricky, and I think that's where finding a professional organization that's in the new field that you want to be involved in will come in, because you will build relationships there that are not people that you're currently working with. That can be a very tricky thing to navigate if your only source of connection are the people that you work with. There are ways, though, especially like through LinkedIn, that you can see who your connections are.
Yep.
and you don't necessarily have to tell Joe why you want to speak to his friend Pete. You can just say, hey, I just noticed that you're friends with Pete, and I've been wanting to learn a little bit about such and such. Is there a way you can connect us? And, you don't have to divulge, look, I'm really tired of this company and I want to get out. You can be a lot more casual about it, and I think the more casual you are about it and the more laid back, actually, a lot of times you're more successful because you don't look desperate.
Absolutely, and for those on the line, I think finding that connection, that similarity, you could always utilize the JMU Alumni Association LinkedIn groups, as well as the chapter groups, and find fellow alumni that are in similar industries or industries that you're interested in, and use some of the feedback that Peg has mentioned about setting up these informational interviews and just gaining that insight into areas that may be of interest to you, and use that connection of JMU to feel comfortable with that interaction.
Go ahead.
Yes, Peg.
I was going to say, that interviewing for information process can be really, really exciting. You can find out things that you didn't anticipate finding out. You can make connections that you don't anticipate making. And that's why you always end with, who else do you think I should talk to? Because each conversation can lead you in a slightly different direction as you explore. And if you actually do it as interviewing for information, trying to explore a field, not like pre-interviewing for a job, it can be a very exciting process.
Absolutely. Questions are flooding in. One of our listeners said that you had mentioned introverts briefly, and this listener is an introvert and feels that sometimes they're overlooked at work due to their quiet nature, or that their introversion is mistaken for a lack of confidence. Can you recommend some strategies for standing out without having to yell louder than everyone else to have that voice?
Oh, gosh, it's really hard. I am an introvert. I'm an extreme introvert on the Myers-Briggs scale, and I'll tell you, that has been the hardest thing, is just what she said, or he said, I don't know if it's a he or she, but being an introvert and trying to get attention, it's really hard, especially when you're trying to advance in your career and you want people to notice what you've done, and a lot of the things that I have done, especially like the leadership stuff I have done, is more like what they call leading from behind, where I push other people and I mentor other people, and, so I don't get noticed, they get noticed. And so it's really difficult. There are a couple of books, though, that I didn't put on that list, honestly. that I could send to you, Emma, if you know who this person is. I could send you a list of those books about,
Wonderful. Or this
yeah,
listener, feel free to contact Peg directly if you feel comfortable, and Peg can provide you with that information.
Yeah, there are a couple of really good books about, introverts in the workplace and job hunting for introverts. There's one specifically that's job hunting for introverts.
There's a book for everything these days.
Well, job hunting for an introvert is really hard, and a lot of times the introverts are actually really good workers because they focus on their work. They're stimulated by the thoughts and the ideas. They're not stimulated by the other people in the office. But they have a hard time presenting themselves in an interview.
So if any of our listeners would like more information on that or a list of the books, definitely contact Peg directly so she can provide that. You will also receive a list of resources that Peg has put together when I send out the recording in a few days to you all too, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to jump into the next question here. Let's see, Peg, what tips do you have to get noticed when you are an older, more experienced professional so that you are able to sell yourself in person to enter a field in which you have currently zero experience?
Okay, so you have zero experience and you're older. That seems like a conundrum to me. If you're older, you have some experience. So what you need to do is take the experience you have and translate it into the field you're targeting.
Short and simple. There it is. Hopefully, I think that goes into the confidence factor as well.
You know what? I think that's what's speaking here is they're saying, well, I don't have any experience now. It's just hard to believe that you're older, you're defining yourself as older, and yet you don't have experience. Maybe you don't have specific experience. You can't just jump into being a coder for computer software coder without training, but if you've got the training, you've got what anybody else coming out of college has.
Absolutely.
Most other things, you have people skills, you have job skills, you have abilities that have been tested. So just see how the vocabulary can translate into the new job field.
Absolutely. Don't discount yourself from an opportunity before anyone else has a chance to consider you for that opportunity. You talk a lot about being a mentor, and so we do have some questions, and this is a hot topic in my area of work, about what are some of the best ways to find a mentor and create that relationship. There have been a few comments here about that's a desire, but some uncertainty of how to make that happen.
Well, this would be a lot easier for an extrovert than an introvert, I'll tell you that. because what you need to do is you need to, people that you admire the way they do something, or you just want to be like them, and so just approach them and say, I really wonder if you'd have some time to offer me a few pointers about how to make better presentations. And if you throw in, I'll buy you lunch, or can we meet for coffee, a lot of times they will do that. First of all, people are often flattered that, oh, you noticed that I do that well. Okay. And there's a lot to be said for chemistry. So if in the first conversation you kind of notice that things are kind of kicking off, you can say, gee, I wonder if you'd be willing to maybe meet with me monthly to see if I could, or maybe we could follow up with email, and gosh, I wish it was possible to find a mentor like you.
Right. How would you recommend identifying who may, I know there's always that chance, like you said, if you're meeting and the chemistry isn't quite there, but how do you recommend identifying a mentor? It seems, when you're a student, they say, oh, look for a faculty member. But, if you are if you're an alum, if you've graduated, or you're, pretty experienced as a professional, who do you recommend, what ways, I guess, do you recommend that we try to identify mentors at our stages in our careers?
Okay, I think that, in any career, in any field, there are people that you look at that you think, wow, I wish I could be like that, or they're doing what I'm dreaming, okay? And here's one of the things that being a freelance writer taught me, okay? This is the worst thing anybody can say to you. No, I don't have time.
Sure.
Okay, move on, not right for our publication at this time. Okay, I'll try you again in 6 weeks,
Right.
Yeah, you have to ask. And here's the thing, if you don't ask, you don't get. That's just the way it is. If you ask, you got a chance. If you don't ask, you've got no chance.
Yep. And I think it has to do with those connections, that power network that Peg was mentioning, identifying people on LinkedIn. If you are part of professional organizations or serving on committees, this is where you should be keeping an eye out for those key players that you hope to emulate in some ways or admire their certain skill sets. So keep an eye out for those.
I really think that, the personal connection speaks so loud. The story I told about my niece wanting to get into set design. And, I didn't even know this friend of mine was working for Universal Studios at the time. And she pointed it out to me, and I was like, oh, yeah, they've been in theater forever, But I wasn't following, where they were working. And she was like, well, could you, set me up with a meeting? I'll tell you something. I don't think she would have gotten a meeting with this person if she hadn't gone through that connection.
Right.
Because this person is just a very, very busy person. But because of the personal connection, they said, okay, I'll give her a half an hour. And in that half an hour, she managed to impress him. And he said, well, I don't have anything, but this other guy I know does. I'll send you over there to talk to him. And, it was 3 or 4 conversations later with people that sent her here to there to there, and he would pick up the phone and say, I'm sending so-and-so over to see you, and she's a great kid, niece of a friend of mine, she's interested in getting into the field. And I just don't think that she would have made those connections without the personal connection.
Right.
She'd still be looking for a job.
Yep.
Right.
So never underestimate the impact a single hello, a single handshake, a single LinkedIn, welcome message can have.
Right.
So Peg, we have time for one more question here. This listener has asked, how does one recover from an eccentric reputation or a black mark in their past? For instance, this individual currently has no references that they can use as they're searching or changing their careers. She does mention that, your suggestions of increasing volunteer work or shadowing could help, but do you have any other recommendations on how to regain, I guess, that credibility for a brighter future?
Yeah, I think the idea of volunteering is a really good one. Because at this point, if she doesn't have a work reference, at least she could have a volunteer reference. It's really hard to overcome something like that. But I'll tell you, I mentor a public speaking group at the Durham Rescue Mission. These are all homeless men. And, it's amazing. People are willing to give people a second chance. A lot of these guys are homeless for a variety of reasons. They've had very bad decisions they've made in their past, but they are starting over, and sometimes you have to start over at a lower pay grade than you were used to in order to prove yourself and work your way back up, especially if it was a really bad black mark on your career field, record. But you can do it. You just have to build credibility again you know, and I think the idea of volunteering or, you know, taking on a job that is probably available, you know, considered a stopgap or a way of proving yourself is maybe a step that you need to take.
Right, and if that listener, again, would like to talk one-on-one with Peg, her information was on that previous slide, or you can reach out to me directly and I can get you connected. Before I wrap up, it looks like, Peg, you had one more survey question you wanted to ask?
Absolutely. How did we do today? If you could go back to Mentee. 889454. Oh, wait a minute. I think I may have not.
There we go.
There you go. Ooh.
Oh, I like the confetti.
Wow. Cool.
Wonderful.
Great.
Well, we'll keep letting these numbers roll in as I wrap up. You know, on behalf of the JMU Alumni Association, Peg, I want to thank you so much for your time, for all of your
pleasure.
insight and knowledge. I think we had some incredible questions come in. I really think that a lot of people gained so much from this. So definitely let me know if I can be of any further assistance to those listeners out there, or you can contact Peg directly for some one-on-one support. And thank you all, our listeners, for being on here, whether you're attending live or listening to the recording. We really appreciate you taking the time to focus on your professional development wherever your career or your professional or personal life is and journey at this moment. If you could take a moment to complete the survey that you will receive when you exit this webinar, that feedback will help us to continue to provide tailored programming for you, our alumni. We also encourage you to check out all of our other recorded webinars on that career and networking page of our website. And also check out our blog, Duke's Take 5. We house all of our archive webinars on there, as well as a bunch of blog posts and alumni features to help you continue to focus on yourself and expand your Madison network. Thank you all again, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. And of course, go Dukes.